Hello and welcome to this special discussion on the wire with Professor Rajeev Gowda, member of Rajya Sabha for the Congress Party. He recently, on behalf of the Congress, released a very exhaustive report on the real state of the economy, which got a lot of prominence. And he heads the research group within the Congress Economic Research Group. So we have him in our with us at the wire to talk about, since he's also a member of Rajya Sabha and Rajya Sabha is being bypassed these days, to talk about how the government has introduced suddenly some new 40 amendments to the finance bill, whereas initially when the budget was proposed there were only about 10 amendments, 10 to 12. And they've surprised the opposition with so many new amendments and very important amendments which need discussion in the Rajya Sabha. But they have been brought in as money bill and are being pushed through, giving rise to this charge from the opposition that the Rajya Sabha is being bypassed in the most undemocratic way. And to discuss that and more, we have Rajeev Gowda with us. So, tell us, Rajeev, what is going on? The opposition has expressed its protest at what is going on. What is your sense? What is the government up to?
Well, I would say that every member of parliament in the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha should register their protest at this. In the Lok Sabha, at the end of the finance bill debate, these 30-40 new amendments were brought in. No Lok Sabha member had the time or the opportunity to really study these amendments and respond to them, to raise the issues on the floor of that house itself. And I'm quite aghast that this government, with its majority in that house and with our track record in the Rajya Sabha of actually cooperatively passing a lot of legislation, including 3 constitutional amendments, that the government would resort to this kind of underhand, sneaky subterfuge in order to try and bring about changes that have no place in the finance bill. In the larger picture is a government that is subverting institutions. Let me just lay out to you what I mean by that, right? You already referred to the Rajya Sabha being bypassed. Any time you try and bring up an issue that should be discussed in both houses, should be subject to scrutiny of parliamentary standing committees, which have members from both houses, etc. If such an issue is not brought before Parliament, but instead brought in as a part of a money bill, then the Rajya Sabha can of course comment on it, but it has no value in a deeper sense because it cannot bring about changes.
Here I want to say what the defense that the ruling party has come up with, saying that the Lok Sabha Speaker has approved the method that they are adopting by bringing all these items, pushing them as money bill.
See, with all due respect to the office of the Speaker, speakers are endowed with judgment with the discretionary power to decide what constitutes a money bill and what does not. There are precedents, and it's not at all clear that by acknowledging and classifying these as money bills, that the Speaker is doing the right thing. Remember, speakers in other houses are, in the context of the anti-defection law, are also allowing members to change parties and to become ministers in governments without being disqualified. So, it's not the case that whenever a speaker makes a decision that, yes, they have the authority, and but it's not the case that it can always be justified.
Tell me, Rajeev, just to sort of clarify to our audience, to bring a tax proposal is a money bill.
Yeah.
Changing the act to amend a taxation proposal. But to give more powers to some middle level tax officials to go and raid people and seize their assets without assigning reasons, how would that be a money bill?
Actually, see, that's part of the larger story, right? What all changes has he brought in here? One change has to do with the reorganization of tribunals. Another set of changes have to do with the powers that have been now given to income tax officials, to raid, to shut down businesses provisionally, to do all kinds of things without ever having to justify, even before another judicial authority.
That has no money implication.
There is no money implication. No. Then another is this whole electoral bond issue.
Yeah.
It has no
changing the political funding norms.
Yes, but that has no implications for the consolidated fund of India.
Absolutely.
Right? It has implications for political parties.
It has implications for companies, big corporates.
Yes. And then there's this issue of whether Aadhaar should be made compulsory across the board, etc. In in sort of defiance of the Supreme Court's ruling. Yeah. So this is a whole series of amendments which should not be part of the finance bill. Essentially, by bringing them in as part of the finance bill, they're making sure that the Rajya Sabha will not be able to respond. But the most draconian part is the one that you've just flagged, which is that income tax officials now are empowered to show up and raid anyone they want without ever having to show cause.
All earlier checks and balances gone?
Oh, there are new checks and balances now. I think BJP will check somebody's bank balance, and then they will check with Amit Shah whether that's the new checks and balances, whether these are the people you need to go and put some pressure on, twist their arms, and ensure that that party provides money to the government or to the ruling party for its own electoral purposes, etc. So I think we are moving away. See, all this while we had checks and balances. That is what a democracy is about. That's how you prepare and citizens and ensure that they are protected against the heavy arm of the state. All those protections are now gone with the amendments that Mr. Jaitley has introduced.
So are you suggesting that democratic procedures are being replaced with discretionary powers in the hands of the ruling politicians?
See, this is a very, very dangerous move. There are two of those kinds of moves that you see here. One is the ability now to appoint members of tribunals, that the government has taken it over for itself, when the courts have said that these are judicial appointments and it's really under their purview. So basically the government says, to hell with the courts, we are going to control who is in charge of these judicial entities, and we're going to control, as a result of that, we're going to influence whatever outcome that's going to arise from there. But more importantly, there is this whole issue of, how did the US go after Al Capone? They got him on the basis of his tax returns, right? What did this is not new for the BJP. The first NDA government under Atal Bihari Vajpayee, they faced a major scandal when there was a Tehelka sting, Tehelka's old avatar, the online portal. They did a sting, and what was the Bangaru Lakshman was caught. The BJP national president was caught on tape, accepting money and things like that, okay, from some fictitious defense contractor, dealers. And after that, with a vengeance, the BJP government at that time, the NDA-1, went after the owner of Tehelka. Okay, I think his name is Shankar Sharma.
Yeah, they let loose the tax department.
They let loose the tax department, and ultimately that Tehelka died.
And eventually he was exonerated also.
He was eventually exonerated, but after how much trouble, how much harassment, right? So essentially, the government knows that it has the capacity to use the tax authorities and to prevent the tax authorities from doing things which are illegal. And remember, the tax authorities are not just a bunch of people out there trying to raise resources for the exchequer. Enough of them are also can be accused of raising money for themselves by working out deals with those who they go after. So what the government is doing now is a draconian measure that is going to be the beginning of an extortionist and sort of a police state where the tax authorities are going to be used to make sure that everyone behaves.
Do you think this has something to do with all these small businesses who may have deposited money, 1,500 notes into the banks, and their balance sheets are with the government? Do you think they'll be going after the small businesses with these new tax measures? And part two of the question is, one doesn't see any of these aggressive tax department activity against big businesses. It appears that the whole policy is skewed against small businesses, whereas the big businesses are sitting pretty, having done a lot of laundering, etc., and not really having to pay for it.
Yeah, the big businesses, I mean, you remember the old jibe of suit boot sarkar. That's very much the case here, and you just have to see who Mr. Modi takes along with him on his foreign trips, or who follows in their own planes and takes part in a variety of meetings. You have a range of people who invested in Gujarat and who are big industrial players. But the second point, or the first point that you made about the small businesses who have now declared more cash, for that, you have a cause. You say, okay, we looked at their records and there's something murky, and so you didn't need to change this law. You could have gone after them with the existing provisions.
Exactly.
And there was absolutely no need to make these changes to go after them. Go after them, ensure that those who had black money and tried to convert them illegally are hauled up. But you don't need to change these laws. These are giving the government of the day. That's what the BJP keeps forgetting. They think that now that they're in power, they will be there forever. They will not. Okay, and day after tomorrow, some other government will come and they will use this against the BJP and its supporters. So this, you should not have such laws in the book, these sorts of changes, and that is terrible. Now, let's get to some of the other issues.
Yeah, the other issues, the political funding.
Yeah.
Why so much opacity? In fact, there is, in whatever the government has announced, there is movement from transparency to non-transparency.
Yeah.
Because so far, companies can up to 7.5% of the net profits of the previous 3 years.
For 3 years.
For average of 3 years, if they can, within that limit, they can contribute to a political party. It is mentioned in their books, it's mentioned in the political party's books. But now they've removed the limit, and now they're saying that it need not be mentioned anywhere and let it be totally anonymous. So why this move from current transparency to total non-transparency?
I'd actually blame you. When I say you, I mean the media. The day Mr. Jaitley announced electoral bonds and he just mentioned, I'm going to try and clean up the system in his budget speech, everyone just went ecstatic and saying, oh, what a bold move. Nobody asked questions about what are the details, what else are they doing. So now that the publicity game is over and everyone says, oh, this government is cleaning up the system, they are bringing in these amendments that actually totally destroy the system, because the whole idea of dealing with corporate funding is to ensure a certain amount of transparency, to try and ensure that you don't have dependency on corporate funding, to ensure that corporate funding also goes across party lines. There's some kind of a level playing field.
Why do you think, Rajeev, they want to protect the names of businesses, big businesses that might want to contribute to various parties?
See, there's a phrase called follow the money, right? I mean, the US, there's a lot of lobbying that goes on. But to its credit, that lobbying is open and visible. So you know who gave what contribution to which congressman or senator, and as a result of which, what policy outcome arose. Now, here, the government is going to make all its policy changes, which will favor some of their favored contributors, the businessmen that Mr. Modi likes to hang out with, etc. But there will be no paper trail linking them with the government. As far as the government is concerned, all those billions of rupees of electoral bonds that they would have got would have been given as homage to the great leader and the inspiration that he gives to the people.
Is Congress proposing an amendment to this in the House?
Well, I spoke for even during his reply, I actually questioned Mr. Jaitley in Mr. Modi's presence and I said, look, this is really removing anonymity and this is not a good thing. And
removing transparency.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, that's what I meant. Introducing anonymity and opacity. Yes, of course. I misspoke there. And essentially, in the process, so he says, no, under the old system, nobody was giving checks because they fear retaliation. And so this is the only way we can infuse white money into the system. I totally disagree. I think you need to find ways to ensure that more people give white money. Anyway, I thought they had eliminated black money after demonetization. You mean to say there's still black money in the country? What happened?
But the Chief Election Commissioner during UP elections did say that 3 times more cash was seized in this election as compared to 2012 UP
so
elections.
That's the other point I made in my speech on the budget on this issue. To Mr. Finance Minister, don't say it's only white money coming in. After demonetization, we saw that the banking system has beautiful ways of making black white. So there's no guarantee that the money that is invested in electoral bonds is actually white in the first place. Anyway, the point is that this move is not a healthy move. It has taken away the caps on how much can be contributed by corporates. It has really opened the doors for the government to extort whatever it wants from anyone, and with nobody being the wiser, because you will not have to account for where this money came from. So if you thought so on the one hand he says I'm lowering the amount that has to be disclosed from 20,000 to 2,000. On the other hand he does this. That makes,
But tell me, even 2,000. It's just little more paperwork.
That's it.
You split the amounts from 20,000 to 2,000. If there were 100 accounts,
Yeah.
it will be that many more.
Right.
You add that many more sort of paperwork. So
I feel-
how does that help?
See, it doesn't do anything. It's again one more part of the eyewash here, okay, which is to give the impression that measures are being taken to clean up the system. But you start looking at the details of their anti-corruption track record. What have they done? They have not. The Lokpal is still lying dormant. Whistleblowers Protection Act is being weakened. Now you have all these other electoral funding is not being cleaned up. How much money actually came in after all those amnesty and related schemes that they created over the last couple of years. So Mr. Modi talks a good game when he says I'm against corruption. Their ability to deliver and the truth of the matter itself is a very, very different story. So what I would say is that this is all a certain amount of sort of a drama for public consumption. The end result will be that the BJP will be able to rake in huge amounts of money by using the tax system, by arm twisting people, and nobody will be able to say who gave what money for what reason. And these are a set of developments that are not good for the larger polity.
Do you think BJP's got somewhat emboldened because of the UP election results? They think that now they can sort of afford to brush aside the opposition protests, even the whatever media protest that exists about these things. There is a new narrative that the liberals don't understand what's going on in the country. The electoral outcome is what the liberals need to understand. How do you see all these things?
No. Let me say that this is one major electoral outcome, and it certainly had its impact, but there are many more electoral outcomes between now and 2019. The country is in ferment. Even Gujarat is seeing agitations of multiple sorts. It is not at all a guaranteed victory for the BJP there. It's also anti-incumbency, a lot of things. So we have Gujarat, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Meghalaya, Himachal. We have many more electoral tests before the government can get very cocky. Let me point out that in all these things, there's one other institution that's being that the government is sort of saying to hell with you, and that is the Supreme Court. When you make Aadhaar mandatory across the board.
This is also part of the
part of the finance bill again.
Yeah.
Again. So the Supreme Court says, please, people who are deserving of various benefits, welfare schemes, you make sure that they get it regardless of whether they have an Aadhaar number or not. Right? That was the observation. And therefore the implication is you don't make it mandatory across the board for various schemes. And the government basically says, to hell with the Supreme Court, we're going to do what we want. And that is not appropriate. You can go back to the Supreme Court and say, look, this is the logic and the rationale.
But isn't the privacy issue
Yeah.
in relation to Aadhaar there with a constitution bench? Do you think the government should have waited for the constitution bench to pronounce?
That's precisely what I meant, that the Attorney General should have gone there and said, look, can you hurry this up? We want to make these moves, etc. And that would have been an opportunity to try and get a proper verdict and for the government to convince the Supreme Court. After all, these are observations. They're not these are things that can be worked out. And but see, this is also the other larger worry that we liberals have, which is if the government's going to make Aadhaar mandatory even for buying medicine, for for your telephone, for your for everything. So you have surveillance on everything that you do. You have what shall we say? The income tax guys ready to barge into your house and seize you and your property, on whatever without having to justify it to anyone else. So what's going to happen? You are going to arm the authorities with weapons which they may not be, which are not appropriate to have in their hands in a democracy. So that is really a matter of great concern, and I'm really worried about where things are going. Let me just say one other thing.
And one, okay, yeah.
See, if we're discussing electoral reforms, right? There are certain kinds of electoral reforms which the country is clamoring for, and which have a place in the budget. And that has to do with state or public funding, right? Today, we've ended up with a situation where, because of things like expenditure limits, which are unrealistic, we have driven expenditure underground. People with black money flourish, so the crooks and criminals dominate. The rest of us get marginalized, if not wiped out of the system. Okay, so some of us somehow managed to get a free merit seat eventually, but that's not the case apparently with other Rajya Sabha seats or some other Rajya Sabha seats. So the basic point is that if you want to clean the system, the government should be raising some resources, allocating resources for state funding and moving things forward.
You're a proponent of state funding of elections.
We call it public funding now because I want the people to feel that it's their money going into cleansing the system, not the state doing something. The state is getting a little too powerful now.
You think that this money can be collected from the people via small election funding cess or something?
There are different ways of doing it. Actually, it's for a big economy like ours and a vibrant democracy like ours, we should just allocate, say, a few thousand crores and say this is the price we're going to pay for cleaning up our democracy, right? And that's a small price to pay for getting rid of the operators and the corrupt officials and everyone else who milks the system saying political funding is needed.
Along with this, Rajeev, just adding to this thought of yours, should there be a mandatory, like you have corporate social responsibility, minimum contribution by companies, whatever, 2.5%. Do you think there should be a 0.5% or 1% for cleaning up the election system?
Well, some years ago, I think CII had actually suggested something like this. An industry body had suggested the creation of a national election fund. And so those are all things that can be certainly explored.
You think this can be explored?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the profitable companies
it can supplement the government's fiscal budget for election.
In fact, if you even open it up to the public for contribution, in the US, when we used to pay our tax returns, there used to be ₹1, $1, whatever you could mark for the election, the presidential election campaign and things like that. That's also possible. And look, it's a small price to pay to clean up this very, very rotting system. And then, of course, there's a lot more work to be done on the media front as well, ensuring that paid news disappears, that media is audited for how much they charged and how many advertisements they ran and whatever else happened, etc. So it's a complicated process. We've already had a good discussion on electoral reform in the Rajya Sabha. I'm hoping to write a series of articles, and possibly you'll cover it on the wire on this larger theme. And so there's a lot of work that we need to do. But the nice thing, and this is what my first reaction was, I applaud the intent across party lines to clean up the system. So let's work towards that in a practical, realistic manner.
But you don't see the sincerity from these proposals?
No. These are proposals that weaken the democracy, weaken institutional checks and balances, which arm the government with draconian powers. These are amendments that I can assure you no MP with any reasonable understanding of history will support across party lines. See, why did he have to sneak them in? Why did they have to sneak them in?
One more point. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley has said somewhere that the political system is not mature enough to make totally transparent check contributions made by businesses, which is why he's seeking anonymity for businesses. But by the same token, individuals who are seeking privacy on account of Aadhaar, individuals saying that I don't want to reveal my Aadhaar card to file returns, I don't want to compromise my database, are being told, no, political system is mature enough to keep the confidentiality of your details. But for the big business, a different standard. Do you see a certain contradiction there?
Yeah, totally. I don't think this government cares for the individual or for privacy or anything. It's part of a sort of an authoritarian, fascist even mindset, and that's characteristic of a government that thinks that it knows what's best for everyone. And the whole point is political funding could have come from corporates if industries are not naive. They give money to different parties also. They cover their bets. It's just that it's a question of how much they give to each side. So I would err on the side of transparency. It's important for contributions to be open and transparent, for us to be able to follow the money, to see who contributed to which party and what policy outcome resulted, right? Nobody here in this country is only interested in the public interest. There are a lot of players interested in getting the government to do favors for them, and that's why they approach parties and politicians and support them with contributions. Now, we want to make those contributions white, and so the electoral bond scheme has that element of it, but the negatives of that outweigh the positives of cleaner money coming into the system.
Thank you very much, Rajeev Gowda, for talking to us. So that was Rajeev Gowda on what is the government up to in the way they're trying to ram so many amendments in the finance bill in Lok Sabha. So that's all for now. Thanks for watching.